Welcome to section 20.3 of Metabolism. In this video, we will focus on memorizing the details of niacin, or vitamin B3. Let's get started. Our story of niacin takes place in a fantasy world where little goblins are making nightsticks. Niacin nightsticks. As you can see, one goblin is tasting the niacin nightstick after putting some flavoring on it. You can see the little salt shaker to add the flavor. Also, look at his tongue sticking out to lick. This way, we know he is trying to taste it. Interestingly, licking is a way that goblins maintain quality control of their products. Anyways, this adding of flavor to the niacin nightstick is to help you remember that production of niacin requires riboflavin, or B2, flavor for riboflavin. Now notice how that goblin is standing on top of 5 other little goblins, forming a pyramid of 6 goblins. This is to remind you that production of niacin also requires pyridoxine, or B6. So forming a pyramid for pyridoxine and 6 goblins for B6. Pyridoxine, B6. Now this is the conveyor belt which produces the niacin nightsticks. If you thought these goblins were innocently making niacin nightsticks, you were wrong. They actually require victims to trip into their machine in order to produce satisfactory, flavorful niacin nightsticks. This tripping requirement is to help you remember that niacin is derived from tryptophan. Trypsin for tryptophan. Sadly, this poor tree has tripped into the machine, falling victim to these goblins, resulting in several niacin nightsticks, which you can see on the conveyor belt. These niacin nightsticks are not just for tasting. Oh no. In fact, they are actually used for a much more sinister purpose, and that is to beat the sap out of these poor tree characters. Notice the sap kind of looks like juicy fat, which should help you think of lipids. And since the fat is dripping low to the ground, represents very low density lipids, or VLDLs. And the VLDLs, or yellow sap, leaving the trees represents how niacin can be used medically to lower VLDL. So patients with dyslipidemia can take niacin to help lower their VLDL level. So again, niacin nightsticks pounding out the yellow sap, which falls to the ground, stands for niacin lowering very low density lipids. Once the pummeling is finished, the goblins instruct their prisoners to march out to fight the goblins' war for them. Notice how strong these trees look now? They even have noticeable tree muscles. You could say their branches look more dense. This is to help you remember that niacin can increase high density lipoprotein. I guess helping these trees become more dense and strong is a good thing, but that's no excuse for the goblins' abuse. So again, niacin nightsticks beating these trees to become more dense stands for niacin being used in dyslipidemia to increase HDL levels, high density lipoprotein levels. Thankfully, some trees are starting to escape and form a rebellion, as you can see with this escaping tree climbing over the fence. Now the trees wasted no time in removing the niacin nightsticks from their goblin oppressors. So this area, on this side of the fence, will have goblins without nightsticks to represent niacin deficiency. Now this tree is holding a goblin high up in the sky. This is causing all of his sun-exposed areas to become hyperpigmented, especially his limbs. This is to remind you that niacin deficiency can result in hyperpigmentation of sun-exposed limbs. Now as you can see, this tree character is writing a new sign that reads, "No tripping." He intends for this sign to replace the old sign on the left, which has led to the death of many of his comrades. And this new sign is to help you remember that a lack of tryptophan can result in a niacin deficiency. This makes sense, because without tryptophan, you can't make niacin. So this no tripping sign in the area of niacin deficiency represents no tryptophan leading to niacin deficiency. Now low tryptophan can be caused by something called Hartnup disease. Notice how the tree painted a cute little heart on the sign? So Hartnup disease is caused by an inability to reabsorb tryptophan as it leaves the kidneys. So it just gets excreted in the urine. Hartnup disease also causes tryptophan to not be absorbed in the intestines in the first place. So whether you're not recovering it from your urine or not obtaining it from your intestines, tryptophan will be low. And again, low tryptophan will result in niacin deficiency. And the payback to these little goblins continues. Look at how these two trees are rubbing this little goblin against the hard bark of that tree's body. This is creating a nice rash around the goblin's neck. Fortunately, this goblin was wearing clothes or his whole body would have a rash, so only his collar region was affected. This is to remind you that niacin deficiency can result in dermatitis of the collar region. So the goblin neck rash stands for dermatitis of the collar region in patients with niacin deficiency. Now look at this goblin over here. He has a tongue full of splinters. Can you guess why he has all these splinters in his mouth? It's from getting rubbed against those trees. Anyways, this red swollen tongue will help you remember that patients with niacin deficiency can have glossitis, a big red swollen tongue. As part of the tree's retribution against the goblins, some of the goblins are getting dunked in this river. This muddy brown river will help you remember that niacin deficiency can cause diarrhea. So diarrhea brown river for niacin deficiency causing diarrhea. Now look at these poor goblins dragging themselves out of this diarrhea river. They're all confused and disoriented. This disorientation and confusion will help you remember that dementia occurs with niacin deficiency. So disoriented goblins for dementia. Now let's look at these two goblins recovering from their punishment. One is anxiously smoking some nicotine to calm his nerves. He even has a nicotine patch on his arm. The nicotine patch will help you remember that nicotinic acid is a good treatment for niacin deficiency. Nicotine sounds like nicotinic acid. So in patients with niacin deficiency, give them nicotinic acid. This other recovering goblin is clutching a big ol' ham. Kind of cute to see these goblins in a more humble light. In any case, this ham signifies high amounts of protein, and this will help you remember that a treatment for niacin deficiency also includes a high protein diet. This is to help obtain the tryptophan needed to make more niacin. So this nightstick deficient goblin clutching the big protein ham is to remind you that niacin deficiency needs to be treated with a high protein diet. Now that we have discussed niacin deficiency with all of these goblins without nightsticks, let's discuss niacin excess. See all of these nightsticks piled up here? Clearly an excessive amount of nightsticks. So everything at the topmost part of this image will represent symptoms of niacin excess. Atop this pile of nightsticks sits a goblin king on his throne. Focusing just on the throne, notice that the gold lining kind of looks like a 3. This is just an additional way to help you remember that niacin is also called vitamin B3. So 3-shaped chair for vitamin B3. Did you notice how fat this Goblin King is? This is because he is eating so much sugar, as you can see with this big pile of sugar by him. This pile of sugar will help you remember that niacin excess results in high blood sugar levels, or hyperglycemia. Now look at his disgusting toes. His toes got this way because he spends so much time barefoot on a big pile of splintery nightsticks. These big red swollen toes represent gout. And gout is caused by uric acid, or hyperuricemia. So when you think of the king's big splintery toes, you will remember hyperuricemia, which is common with excess niacin. Now this gross goblin king is entertaining prostitutes. Look at that nasty goblin hooker. She's pretty upfront about her profession. She's even got a sash labeled prostitute. I guess I can appreciate that honesty. Well, this prostitute represents prostaglandins. Now notice those rosy cheeks on the king. He's kind of nervous about being around this prostitute. Anyways, this facial flushing on the king in front of the prostitute will help you remember that facial flushing can be induced by prostaglandins. And excess niacin causes increased prostaglandins. So when patients take a lot of niacin as a supplement, they get a lot more prostaglandins released, which causes this facial flushing. And this can be a very frustrating side effect for patients taking niacin supplements. Now look at this goblin worker. He is impervious to the advances of this prostitute. No blushing at all. In fact, he's really just focused on his pet asp wrapped around his arms. This asp represents aspirin. Patients can avoid the dreadful flushing with niacin supplements if they take aspirin as well. Aspirin, an NSAID, blocks the prostaglandins from building up and causing problems. So again, the asp on the non-blushing goblin in front of the prostitute stands for aspirin preventing prostaglandins from causing flushing. And those are all the details you need to memorize about niacin.